My name is Catarina Matias. I'm a GP in Portugal, and I'm here representing the European Union of General Practitioners. And I think I have a major responsibility because, yeah, I must do it well. Um, we were asked to make a short presentation with the key points. I hope I'm not going to take too long. The first one was to make a point where are we today? In my practice, when I was making this presentation, I asked in the weekly meeting that we have, I asked my colleagues what is pharmacovigilance all about, and I gave them freedom to answer, not saying what was the official one. They were all around this definition, but not quite so. So I think it's very important also, always to revisit this definition, because I think it's very important to know that it's not only the detection, assessment, understanding and prevention of adverse effects, but also the drug-related problem, all the drug-related problems. It's a wide definition. Today, in the 21st century, the definition is a little bit more complex because it concerns the process of pre-market review and also the post-market surveillance and the identification of previously unrecognized adverse events. This is very important because doctors sometimes are a little bit afraid of something. They are not sure it's important or not. It's a new thing, it's a new reality. So it's very important to make sure they do this and they understand actually this point. The major problem when I was looking to the evidence was the unreporting. It's a map that is not complete. It's a puzzle that it's not complete. And the major gaps were identified in three major categories: the technology, the education, and the overall process. And the key actors were mainly the lack of standardized process, the lack of training and education, and also the lack of integrated health information technologies. And also the patient characteristics. We shouldn't put aside the patient characteristics, the individual ones, the educational level, the culture, and also their diseases, their clinical status. And also, one thing that I think it's very important, I don't know if it's mainly because I'm a GP, but the communication and the relation between doctors and patients, the empowering and the empathy are also things that I think we must put into practice. There are already identified the 7 deadly sins of the doctors when we are talking about the reporting. We have the complacency, the afraid of getting involved in a lawsuit, also the guilt of having been responsible for something, and the ambition concerning the financial benefit. But the ones that were most appointed were the ignorance on how to describe the notification, also the insecurity about reporting suspicions, and the indifference. Sometimes we postpone very much the reporting of adverse effects. And empirically, not concerning these deadly sins, my colleagues also talked about the lack of time to do it. In the daily practice, we have a major amount of things to do, and sometimes we actually don't have the time at the end of the day, or we stay at our practice for a little bit more time to do this because this is actually an important thing. The other thing that was talked about was the complexity of the whole process. So I've got to go where, I've got to fill in what form, and how does this form is filled in. So it was very important to talk about these two issues. And a third one that I wasn't aware of, but I think it's very important also, should I do it? There was a situation of a colleague that talked to me about his patient that was on chemotherapy, and he had an adverse event, and the doctor, the GP, was asking, should I do it, or should the oncologist do it? I think all of us should do it, the patient, the oncologist, the general practitioner, but there is a doubt, there are doubts about this still remaining. We've identified the 7 deadly sins, but there is another one that is very important. There is a lack of training in pharmacovigilance, not only referred in articles that we've read, but also referred by doctors. So what are our needs? Further support about education, and also further support around the black triangle, for example. Some of my colleagues don't know actually what's the black triangle about, so it's very important to also, I thought it was very important to talk about this, for example, as an example. Finally, we have the strategy. We are going to suggest just some points that we thought it might be important. To improve safety communication strategies, to be aware that information comes from the national competent authorities or professional body is very important. And also collaboration with authors of the most preferred channels for keeping up to date on safety information. It was mentioned that the point of care and email were the generally preferred methods, while mobile phone, text, and social media were not highly rated. So this is also very important. How do we reach doctors? And also some country-specific preferences that can be considered for successful safety communication. This concerns not only cultural preferences, but also organizational. We can take one of the techniques that is used, and if it works, so do it. And also, only 1 out of 8 reports from GPs was well documented. Why does this happen? How can we improve it? Also, regarding information required to accurately assess drug causality and about drug-induced diseases. And when should we talk with doctors about pharmacovigilance? We have the under and postgraduate education. In the undergraduate education, in some countries, the pharmacovigilance issue is we talk about it in the 3rd or 4th year of medicine school. But sometimes this is not enough, because when a student becomes a young doctor, sometimes he doesn't remember what he talked about, and if that is important and what is important concerning this issue. Also, there can be or might be too many mandatory criteria that could discourage reporting. So it's very important to make it short and simple. I think this is a major point. And finally, other intervention that could be possible is the group informative talk on pharmacovigilance and accompanying physicians during clinical visits, reminders to medical staff, feedback to medical staff, and improving accessibility to the report format. Pharmacovigilance must transform itself to a more flexible and dynamic process. And we should support clinicians in making accurate diagnosis and help patients also jointly with their healthcare professionals to make informed choice about their therapeutical options. Here again, we talk about the empowerment, the doctor-patient relationship, the empathy, the communication issue. This is, I think it's a very important issue, because in medical schools, we don't talk very much about communication, and now we are trying to get it on the pre and postgraduate formation. So sometimes we concern about technical scientific issues, but we lack the communication power and its potential. Also, to ensure that information about medicinal products is transparent, accurate, accessible, relevant, and timely. And help also to determine the best treatment options and policies within mass treatment programs. Finally, to have broader considerations in mind, such as drug environment interactions, concerning with possible consequent effects on animals and humans. Thank you so much. I'm open to your questions.
Thanks very much, Katerina, for giving a doctor's view very much from a GP perspective, very interesting. Again, very much a focus on delivery of healthcare and a big emphasis on education and training there. Would any of the other doctors in the audience, maybe either general practitioners or from other specialities or sections of medicine, wish to make an intervention to complement that? Any questions, please, Francois?
When you say that pharmacovigilance should transform itself to help patients make informed choices about treatment, do you mean by this that as a professional you would be okay if, when reporting an ADR to a pharmacovigilance expert, instead of responding to the patient, go and talk to your doctor, you would accept that the assessor would recommend some actions that the patients could carry on to solve, or how could pharmacovigilance transform itself? What do you think pharmacovigilance?
I don't know if I understand very well what you asked.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, this is because sometimes we think that apart from when we report, one big question is which feedback should we receive from pharmacovigilance experts? And some are saying that maybe we should receive some advice more than go and talk to your doctor. A clear example, in May, I suffered from acute renal failure, and I was on 4 products, and they all could explain the product. None of my doctors would know what to do. I reported the side effect, and the advice I had was excellent. They told me that I could consult a pharmacologist, a clinical pharmacologist, who understood what was happening. And this pharmacologist was working in the exact same department that received the adverse drug reactions. So instead of losing time consulting my 4 doctors, if immediately from the report, from the feedback to my report, I would have received this advice from this clinical pharmacologist, I would have solved the issue much more rapidly and efficiently than by visiting the other doctors. So the question is, do you think that it's time for this change where pharmacovigilance experts themselves could say more than what they currently say when they send some feedback in a report, and not substitute to the role of the doctors, but still try to help with what they know?
I think this is a major question. Thank you for your question. But there are several aspects that we have got to think about this. The pharmacovigilance expert, is that important? Yes, it's very important. But do you have it in the day-to-day practice? For example, me as a GP, in my practice, I don't have access to a pharmacovigilance expert. I can go home and study about all the effects of the medicines, and I can ask for some advice, but I cannot go to an expert directly. So probably the report is going to start a whole procedure that is going to take your to give you information and to say to you what was going to be best or worst for you. But then again, it would be the ideal thing to do, but is it possible in all countries, all member states to do it?
I think the situation you described, Francois, is a unique and excellent example of best practice, where you have regional pharmacovigilance centres embedded in either medicines information or clinical pharmacology departments, but that isn't available in many countries in Europe. Just
So this is
it's
why
a unique experience.
the name of the session is in the five years.
In the future, absolutely,
That's
absolutely,
why I mentioned it.
Raymond, please.
Could I suggest that pharmacists have training for 5 years in medicines, and one of the things that pharmacists have is an expertise in medicines. Is there, do you see in the future a better collaboration between physicians and pharmacists, where the pharmacists are looking after and maybe providing more information to patients about the pharmacovigilance and the issues around their medicines?
Thank you for your question. I think it's very important to have that in mind, because I think it's the way to do it in the future, in the next 5 years, or to organize in that way, because I think we should start mainly for the communication between pharmacists and doctors, because that communication is not, I think the first point is that, because we don't even communicate so well. So let's start in that point and then go further into the ideal point that you've just mentioned.